Libra, before you scroll, answer this honestly. When was the last time you felt ready, but nothing moved? Not stuck, not lost, just quietly waiting, like life paused you on purpose. Here's the part no one says out loud. This kind of waiting isn't empty. It's uncomfortable because it's personal. Something in you has been rebalancing, not your plans, your standards. You've stopped reacting the old way, stopped explaining, stopped bending just to keep the peace. If that's you, type "I trust myself" in the comments. Not for anyone else, just as a signal to your own nervous system. And ask yourself this: what if this pause wasn't holding you back, but quietly lining you up for a version of balance you've never lived before? Stay with me. We're about to step into the part most people miss. And if you're still here, I want to talk to you the way I would if we were sitting across from each other, late evening, nothing to prove, nothing to rush. Because the truth is, Libra never really stops moving. You don't freeze, you don't give up. You keep thinking, you keep weighing, you keep adjusting the scales inside your chest, trying to make everything feel fair again. From the outside, it looks like waiting. But inside, it feels like standing in the middle of a room where the furniture has been quietly rearranged and your body hasn't caught up yet. This kind of waiting doesn't come with signs. No green light, no clear signal, no confirmation that says, "Now, go." It's just that strange sensation that your old responses don't fit anymore. The words you used to reach for don't come out the same way, whilst the compromises that once felt noble now feel heavy. And that can be unsettling, because Libra energy is relational. You feel things through connection, through resonance, through reflection. So when the mirror stops answering back, when the usual feedback goes quiet, it's easy to wonder if something has gone wrong. But here's the part people rarely say. Some seasons aren't designed to move your life forward. They're designed to slow your reactions down. Not so you can wait longer, but so you can respond differently. I've watched this pattern show up again and again with Libra. Right before a shift, there's a stretch where nothing seems urgent anymore. Not because nothing matters, but because your nervous system is recalibrating what actually deserves your energy. You're not waiting for results. You're waiting for alignment inside yourself to stop wobbling. And that limbo can feel lonely, because you're still present, still listening, still caring. But you're no longer rushing to smooth every edge, no longer volunteering to carry imbalance just to keep things pleasant. That's a quiet kind of courage. So let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you noticed yourself pause before responding, instead of automatically making things easier for everyone else? That pause matters. It's not empty space, it's information. It's the moment where an old reflex starts loosening its grip and something more honest begins to surface. And if you sit with that pause long enough, without filling it, without explaining it away, you might start to feel something subtle happening beneath it. Not movement yet, not clarity, just a sense that the balance point inside you is quietly shifting its weight. And once that changes, everything else tends to follow. Let's stay right there for a moment, because what's happening next isn't about waiting anymore. It's about what you're no longer willing to return to once you move forward. And this is usually the moment when the mind starts using a familiar word: delay. We say it softly at first, almost politely, as if naming it might make it behave. But I want to sit with you here for a second and tell you something honestly, as a friend who's watched this pattern up close. Most pauses aren't delays. They're just spaces the mind doesn't know how to rest inside. The brain wants movement, feedback, proof, something to react to. So when life goes quiet, when nothing demands a response. The mind fills the silence with urgency. It calls the stillness a problem. But Libra, your kind of quiet is different. What you've been experiencing isn't a lack of motion, it's a recalibration. There's a subtle moment that happens right before your standards shift. You can feel it in the body first. A slight resistance, a pause before saying yes, a hesitation before smoothing things over. That's not procrastination. That's discernment waking up. You're standing at the edge of a choice that no longer wants to be made the old way. And because you're relational by nature, because harmony matters to you, it can feel uncomfortable to admit that what kept the peace before may no longer keep you whole now. So the pause stretches. Not because you're stuck, but because part of you is checking in before committing again. I've noticed this with Libra more than any other sign. Right before growth, there's a moment where pleasing others starts to feel heavier than disappointing them. Not dramatic, not explosive, just quietly misaligned. And the mind doesn't know what to do with that feeling, so it labels the space as delay. But here's the reframe that changes everything. Nothing is being withheld from you. Nothing is frozen. Nothing has gone wrong. You're simply not willing to move forward carrying the same agreements, the same emotional labor, the same automatic compromises. That doesn't mean you've hardened. It means you've clarified. And clarification takes time, especially for someone who sees every side. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you noticed yourself hesitate not out of fear, but out of self-respect? That hesitation is information. It's your internal scales testing a new balance point. And once that point settles, movement tends to follow on its own. Without force, without persuasion, just alignment. If you allow yourself to stay with this moment, without rushing it, you may start to sense something subtle happening underneath. A quiet shift in what you tolerate, in what you reach for, in what you're willing to explain away. And that's where the story deepens. Because when your standards change, the world doesn't respond immediately. It waits for consistency. And that waiting isn't punishment, it's confirmation. Let's stay right here together for another breath. Because what's been moving beneath this pause has less to do with timing and much more to do with balance finding its new center. And once that balance point inside you begins to settle, something else starts to happen. Not loudly, not in a way that asks for attention. It happens the way evening light shifts across a room. You do not notice it all at once. You notice it later, when the room feels different and you cannot explain why. Real change rarely announces itself. It does not come with excitement. It does not come with certainty. It comes with silence. You speak less. Not because you have nothing to say, but because fewer things feel worth explaining. You stop justifying your timing. You stop narrating your choices. You stop offering context so others can feel comfortable. And for Libra, that is not a small thing, because you are wired to relate, to connect, to keep the atmosphere smooth. So when you begin choosing quiet over clarity, it can feel unfamiliar, almost like losing a skill you once relied on. But this is not loss. This is refinement. Alignment does not show up as motivation. It shows up as restraint. You pause before responding. You feel the urge to smooth things over and let it pass. You notice the difference between keeping the peace and abandoning yourself to do it. That difference lives in the body first. A tightness that says no. A stillness that says wait. And instead of overriding it, you listen. That is when your inner scales begin to tip. Not back and forth, but toward one side. Your side. Not in a defensive way. Not in a hardened way. In a grounded way. I have seen this many times with Libra. The moment alignment begins, you stop needing agreement. You stop needing understanding. You stop needing others to validate the direction you are facing. You may even wonder why certain conversations feel louder than they used to. Why certain dynamics suddenly feel exhausting. Nothing has gone wrong. Your tolerance has simply changed. And that change is quiet on purpose. If it were dramatic, you might react instead of integrate. If it were obvious, you might rush to label it instead of living it. So it arrives softly, through what you no longer explain, through what you no longer chase, through what you no longer fix. Let me ask you something gently. Have you noticed how some things that once pulled at you now barely register? Not because you care less, but because you care more about staying aligned. That is growth. Not the kind people applaud, the kind that keeps you steady. And here is the part worth sitting with. When your internal balance shifts, the external world does not immediately respond. It waits, not to test you, but to see if the change is real. To see if you will return to the old pattern out of habit, out of comfort, out of politeness. And this space right here is where that confirmation happens. So stay with this quiet for a moment longer. Not to force clarity, not to rush movement. Because what is aligning now is not your circumstances, it is your loyalty. And once that loyalty settles in your body, the next chapter does not need to be announced. It simply begins when you are no longer willing to stand on the old side of the scale. And once that loyalty inside you settles, you begin to notice something else. The idea of balance starts to feel different in your body. Not lighter, not heavier, just clearer. For a long time, balance meant keeping the room calm, keeping the tone even, making sure no one felt uncomfortable, even if you had to quietly disappear to do it. You were good at that. Too good. You knew how to smooth a moment before it turned sharp, how to soften your truth so it would land gently. And for a while, that felt like grace. But what you are learning now is that harmony built on self-abandonment never stays balanced for long. It just looks peaceful from the outside. This new balance you are stepping into does not rush to fix. It does not volunteer to absorb tension. It does not explain itself into exhaustion. It pauses. And in that pause, you ask a different question. Not how do I keep this fair for everyone, but what feels honest for me right now? That question changes everything. Because alignment is not something you add to your life. It is something you remove from it. You remove the conversations that require you to shrink. You remove the habits that ask you to betray your own timing. You remove the quiet agreements you made when you did not yet know your worth. This is not selfish. It is stabilizing. I want you to hear this clearly. Peace doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need to be witnessed. It doesn't need approval to be real. The calm you are learning now is quieter than the kind you used to chase. It does not announce itself. It doesn't perform. It simply stays. And there may be moments where that feels lonely. Because when you stop over-explaining, some people do not know where to place you anymore. When you stop adjusting, some dynamics lose their shape. That is not failure. That is truth reorganizing itself. Let me ask you something softly. Have you noticed how certain situations no longer pull you into debate, but instead invite you into stillness? Not indifference, clarity. That is your balance recalibrating. And here is the part most people misunderstand. Holding a boundary is not an act of resistance. It is an act of alignment. You are not pushing anyone away. You are simply standing where you belong. And when you stand there long enough, without apology, without performance, without explanation, something subtle happens. The world begins to adjust around you. Not immediately, not dramatically, but steadily. And this is where the story begins to deepen again. Because once you stop betraying yourself for harmony, you start noticing what quietly falls away on its own. Some roles, some expectations, some versions of you that no longer need to exist. So stay with this feeling for another breath, this calm, this groundedness, this unspoken yes to yourself. Because what comes next is not about finding balance anymore. It is about recognizing what has already begun to leave, now that you are no longer holding it in place. And somewhere inside that calm, another truth begins to surface. It is not loud enough to announce itself. It does not demand attention. It simply loosens its grip. Before anything new ever arrives, something familiar usually steps back. Not dramatically, not with conflict, just quietly, like a role that knows its scene is over. For Libra, this can feel confusing, because you are not walking away from life. You are not giving up. You are still present, still thoughtful, still aware, but something inside you has stopped reaching. You may notice it in small moments. The need to be understood no longer pulls as hard. The urge to smooth things over arrives, and then fades. The instinct to wait for consensus feels unnecessary now. That can be unsettling, especially if you have spent years being the bridge, the one who holds space, the one who keeps everyone steady. You were good at that role. It mattered, and it shaped who you are. But roles have seasons, and some seasons end quietly, without asking permission. What is leaving you now is not your kindness. It is the version of you that believed harmony required self-sacrifice. What is ending is the habit of measuring your worth by how well you keep the peace. What is loosening is the reflex to pause your own truth until everyone else feels ready. And you might not even notice this ending at first, because nothing is breaking, no door slams, no argument forces clarity, no moment demands a decision. Instead, you simply do not step forward the way you used to. You hesitate, not from fear, but from a new awareness. I have seen this many times with Libra. Right before a deeper alignment, there is a subtle withdrawal from old identities, not because they were wrong, but because they are complete. Let me ask you something gently. Have you felt that strange relief when you choose not to explain yourself anymore? That relief is not apathy. It is release. You are not losing direction. You are shedding a role that no longer fits the balance you are building now. And this kind of ending does not need ceremony. It does not need closure conversations or final statements. It simply asks for consistency. To not step back into what you have outgrown just because it feels familiar. To not rescue old dynamics out of politeness. To let what is finished remain finished. That can feel lonely at times, because when you stop playing a role, others may not know where to place you. But that space is where something truer begins to form. Not yet visible, not yet defined, just lighter. So if you have been feeling a quiet detachment lately, a soft pulling away without resentment, know this: you are not drifting. You are making room. And what comes next does not arrive by force. It arrives once you are no longer holding the past in place. Stay right here for another breath. Because after something ends without resistance, the story does not rush forward. It softens. And in that softness, You begin to sense how change can happen without needing to be announced at all. And maybe that is why this alignment feels so difficult to describe, because nothing about it is dramatic. There is no moment where the sky opens, no rush of certainty, no scene you could point to and say this is when everything changed. If it were loud, you would question it. If it were emotional, you might mistake intensity for truth and reach for the familiar patterns again. So instead, it arrives quietly, almost carefully. You do not feel different overnight. You simply notice that you no longer feel the need to announce who you are becoming. There is a subtle confidence in that. Not the kind that performs, the kind that settles. You stop proving your growth. You stop explaining your choices. You stop needing others to witness your clarity before you trust it. For Libra, this can feel unfamiliar. You are used to processing things through reflection, through conversation, through shared understanding. So when alignment begins without commentary, without agreement, without reassurance, it can feel almost invisible. But invisible does not mean absent. It means integrated. Real alignment does not pull attention. It holds center. It shows up when you choose not to respond immediately, when you let silence answer for you, when you feel no urge to correct assumptions that no longer define you. And there is a deep maturity in that restraint. Because growth that needs to be named often still needs to be confirmed. Growth that has already taken root. Let me ask you something softly. Have you noticed how some things you once wanted to explain now feel unnecessary to say out loud? That is not withdrawal, and that is self-trust forming. You are no longer negotiating your truth in real time. You are living it. And that is why this alignment feels subtle. It does not interrupt your life. It reorganizes it quietly from the inside. You may even wonder at times if anything is happening at all. But then you catch yourself reacting differently, choosing differently, walking away without resentment. And you realize something fundamental has shifted. This kind of change does not need witnesses. It does not need labels. It does not need a story wrapped around it. It just needs space to settle. And Libra, you are learning how to stay in that space without filling it, without rushing to define it, without trying to make it understandable to everyone else. That is not indecision. That is discernment becoming embodied. And this is the kind of alignment that stays with you because it does not depend on momentum. It depends on consistency. And once you taste that steadiness, once you feel how it anchors you, you become less interested in anything that requires performance to feel real. So stay with this subtlety a little longer. Let it be quiet. Let it be unnamed. Let it be yours. Because the most meaningful shifts in life often happen when we stop trying to describe them and start noticing how they change the way we stand. And from that grounded place, the next movement does not need to be forced. It reveals itself when you are no longer asking for proof that you are ready to move at all. And from this grounded place, the question is no longer what is coming next. It becomes something quieter. How do you walk forward without losing this steadiness you have found? Not by forcing clarity, not by demanding answers, not by rushing the moment into a shape it is not ready to hold. You walk forward by staying in conversation with your body, by noticing how something feels before you decide what it means. There is a subtle intelligence inside you now that did not exist the same way before. It speaks softly. It does not argue. It does not push. It simply responds. So when something asks for your time, your energy, your agreement, you pause. You listen for resonance, not obligation. And if the response feels tight, unclear, or rushed, you do not override it anymore. You let the answer arrive on its own timing. That is not hesitation. That is respect. For yourself, for the process, for the balance you are learning how to protect. Walking forward from here does not require certainty. It requires presence. Presence with the moments that feel aligned. Presence with the moments that feel unfinished. Presence with the spaces in between. You are allowed to move gently now. You are allowed to take smaller steps that do not need explanation. The world may ask you to define yourself again, to clarify, to commit, to choose quickly. You do not have to answer immediately. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing anything. You are simply moving at the speed that allows you to stay intact. Let me ask you something softly, as a friend would. What would change if you trusted your internal rhythm more than external pressure? What would feel lighter if you stopped needing everything to make sense all at once? Because this new way of moving is not about arrival, it is about alignment in motion. You will recognize it not by excitement, but by ease. Not by certainty, but by coherence. Things begin to connect without effort. Decisions become quieter. Your energy stops scattering. And you find yourself standing in your life with less resistance. Libra, if you are here right now, listening to this moment unfold, it may not be because you are meant to wait longer. It may be because you are learning how to walk forward without abandoning yourself along the way. So take this next step lightly, without announcement, without performance. Let the path reveal itself one honest response at a time. And trust this. You do not need to be louder. You do not need to be faster. You only need to remain aligned with what has already begun to settle inside you. That is how you move forward now. Not heavier, not harder, but truer. And that is enough to carry you into whatever comes next. And maybe the most important thing to notice now is how quiet this moment feels. Not empty, not uncertain, just settled. So let me ask you this, Libra. When you imagine moving forward from here, what feels lighter than it used to? That question matters, because lightness is often the first sign that you are no longer carrying what was never meant to last. Here's a small observation, one most people miss. The moments that change us the most rarely announce themselves. They arrive without applause, without urgency, sometimes without words at all. So tonight, try this simple inner practice. Before you sleep, place one hand on your chest, take one slow breath, and ask yourself quietly, what am I no longer forcing? Do not answer right away. Let the silence respond. You do not need to fix anything tonight. You do not need clarity. You do not need a plan. This is one of those rare pauses where listening does more than action ever could. And if this message found you in a moment where your heart felt strangely calm, or strangely tired, or strangely ready, you are not alone. Many Libras are standing in this same in-between space right now, not waiting, not rushing, just learning how to trust themselves again. If something here resonated, leave a quiet comment. Even a single word is enough. It helps others recognize themselves too. And if you feel called to stay, to walk this journey together, make sure you're subscribed. The next message is already forming. I'll leave you with this. You don't need to become someone new. You're simply remembering how to stand on your own side of the scale. Trust yourself, Libra. The rest unfolds when it's ready. We'll continue soon.